Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muli wanji, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We're coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so very honored that you are joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Stitcher Radio, wherever you get your podcasts. And please be sure to tell all of your family and friends, your kids' teachers, librarians, strangers you meet on the street. Let them know all about your show. Our guest today is Doreen Berger. She is here to celebrate her middle grade novel, The Captain's Daughters. Before we invite Doreen into the studio, we want to invite you to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. If you are a parent, please be sure to check the Parents Click Here button that's at the top of the page. That way you can visit our Certified Great Read Wall of Fame. Find a book that deserves a place on your family library. You can also check out our blog and sign up for our free newsletter. We're really proud of the newsletter. It's really growing, and you're going to enjoy it. If you're an author, please be sure to check the Authors Click Here button at the top of the page. Find out how you can be a guest here in the podcast, how you can submit your book to our Certified Great Read panel, and also find out how we can help you celebrate your book through our monthly promotion program. Celebrating your book with commercials here on the podcast, with messages to our 100,000 plus social media followers, displaying your book on our nationwide network of digital pedestrian billboards, and have your book in our booth at whatever event we're participating in a given month. Also, you can use the contact button at the top of the page to send us a message. Let us know what we're doing well, let us know what we could be doing better, and let us know who we should have on a future episode of the podcast. Join us right now from beautiful Long Island in the state of New York. Our guest today, well, let me first, before I introduce our guest, I'm always encouraging listeners to go to readingwithyourkids.com, clicking on the contact button at the top of the page, telling us who they would like to hear on a future episode of the podcast. And not too long ago, I received one of those emails, and it said, hey, I think you should have Doreen Berger on. She wrote The Captain's Daughter, and it's a great upper middle grade novel, and she should be on your podcast. And by the way, I'm Doreen, and I listen to your podcast, and I want to be a guest. And so here she is. Please welcome to the show the author of The Captain's Daughter, Doreen Berger. Hey, Doreen, how are you?
Hey, Jed, I'm doing fine, and I'm so thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm really glad that you listened to that message and you reached out to me, because we really do. We love when our listeners suggest different guests, even when they're suggesting ourselves. We've had some of our best conversations with those authors.
Great.
Yeah. So tell us about The Captain's Daughter, please.
Okay, The Captain's Daughters is the first book in a series. The Captain's Daughters is the first book. Beyond the Stars is the second book. And these are middle grade science fiction books. They take place about 275 years in the future, in the year 2297, which is so much fun to write because I can use my imagination and come up with what I would like to see, almost 300 years from now. But the books are about 12-year-old sisters, Diane and Robin. They're not twins, but they're less than a year apart, so they're very, very close. And their father is the captain of the starship Polaris, where they live, which is great fun for them. They have a knack for finding mischief and trouble, and this environment works very well for them. Not so much for their father, but pretty much good for them. In the first book, though, they're on shore leave, and they're with their father at their grandparents' horse ranch in Santa Fe, New Mexico. They're out horseback riding, and they get abducted by aliens who turn out to be an enemy of their father. And the whole book is basically them trying to get home, and their father trying to find them. And throughout the book, there are flashbacks. As the girls are thinking and missing home, they're thinking about all the things that have happened in their past, of all the times that they misbehaved, the times they got into trouble, the stunts they pulled, their fears, their insecurities, and basically how their father handled all of these situations. And it's very interesting.
Yeah.
Because the book is also written, of course, about the girls and from their point of view, but it also is, some of the chapters are written from their father's point of view and what he's going through, missing his daughters and looking for his daughters and reminiscing about them. And in the discussions that I've had with kids about the book, they find that interesting because a child's world is basically self-centered.
Mm-hmm.
They don't really think about what their parents are thinking about when something happens. They're thinking about their little world. And it's interesting, it's interesting for them to realize, oh God, look at what he's thinking of. Look what he's going through. And, you know, some of the comments are from the kids themselves are very interesting, you know, especially because this is a book about a father and his daughters.
Mm-hmm.
It's a father-daughter relationship book. They don't have a mother. And so everything that happens is through their father, which also is interesting.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I love about it is that we're talking about a story that's taking place almost 300 years in the future. And I'm excited because there's still a future, because there's so much talk these days about the Earth ending in 2050 or 2065 or, 2023.
Right.
And we're just coming off of this 2-year period, 2-year plus period where it's like, are we going to get back to normal? Are we going to be able to make it? Yeah. So I think that's one of the things that I love about science fiction is it's really hopeful. Even the science fiction that's kind of dark and, filled with conflict and whatnot, it's hopeful in that we're still around. Human beings are still around 200, 300, 1,000 years in the future.
That's how I chose to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
I know that there are a lot of dystopian novels, and like you said, some of them are very dark, some of them are very scary. I choose to think that the future has hope, that there will be a point where there is world peace. And in my imagination, in coming up with this world that these girls live in, at some point, the Earth, and yes, after another world war, where millions and millions of people are killed, people really begin to believe if we don't stop this, we're just going to annihilate each other.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get it together. Let's work together. And because they finally do work together as a planet, they are able to come up with these fabulous technologies that allow them to go into space. And once they're there, they find galaxies full of people. And the experiences, and each person and each planet has its own story and its own history, and it's just filled with excitement and wonder. Yeah. And I think it's wonderful for kids to be able to think that way, that there is a universe filled with others who might think like them or might not think like them. Mm-hmm. But it's just so much fun to imagine it.
Yeah. I'm curious why you made the choice to write about what we would call in Boston Irish twins, sisters who are just 9-10 months apart.
Well, I'll tell you. They're actually 8 months apart. And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
I wrote the book, I based the books on my lifelong friendship with my best friend, Robin. And I took elements of our lives and wrote them into the books. Like Robin and I were always in some kind of trouble when we were in school. So some of the things we do were actually the basis of some of the flashbacks of the trouble the girls got into, right? Robin and I are exactly 8 months to the day apart. I was born April 8th. She was born December 8th, as the girls are in the book. So I wove it into the story in that Diane is born, and her parents decide to have, she's such a good baby, of course, that her parents decide to have another baby almost immediately. But her parents are killed in an interplanetary war. And Robin is born prematurely, exactly 8 months to the day after Diane was born. And their guardianship was given to their uncle. So technically their father is really their uncle, but he's the only parent they've ever known. He's had them since the day Robin was born and Diane was 8 months old. Wow. So there is woven into the story this story of adoption also, and how this man who never expected to have children because he was planning on a life in Space Central. His goal was always to be a starship captain, and starship captains are not allowed to have family aboard their starships, even though the rest of the crew can. Families were never in his future, and yet he would not think of not honoring his brother's wishes to take these girls, and he did. And for the first 5 years, they had to live on the ranch, the horse ranch, with their grandparents till he could take them. And when they were 5, he took them, and then he fought with his superiors at Space Central to allow him, the only starship captain in the fleet, to have his own children aboard. Wow. And so that's why Diane and Robin are 8 months apart. Because Robin and I are 8 months apart.
That's really neat. And that's a good reason for them to be 8 months apart.
I think so too.
What a great testament to your friendship, and that's really beautiful. I'm curious because when I'm on stage, I'm telling stories, and most of the stories are from my life with a little, maybe a lot of embellishment. And, and they're coming, and I try to do the best I can to remember how I told the story in Hempstead and tell it the same way when I'm in Brooklyn and tell it the same way when I'm in Philly, although they change a little bit here and there. So I know that it's difficult to keep my stories and the embellishments straight, and they're experiences that I lived. How difficult is it for you, for an author who's creating a world and creating the rules of that universe to kind of keep things straight?
I have to write everything down. Now, let me tell you, I'm not a spring chicken. I'm old. So if I don't write it down, it doesn't get done. It doesn't get said. So I always have a pad and pencil with me. And as I think of things, I write them down. I have a style sheet for all my books that, says everything about a character, an object, a spaceship. Everything that I create gets written down so that in the next book, I can go back and make sure that my facts are the same, they carry over properly, down to how many crew members are on the ship so I don't misrepresent it in the second book. But yes, everything gets written down because it is hard, especially when you're creating this whole new world, that could be just absolutely anything. Right. I have to write it down.
Yeah. Have you ever gotten to the point where you're at a point in the story and you're kind of stuck and it's like, oh, that couldn't happen in real life. And then you realize, but this is the future and I can just invent something.
That is the best part about writing futuristic science fiction. Anything I want to happen can happen, and it will. Just because my imagination says it will. Yeah. That makes it fun.
I'm curious. We've had one of our past guests, of course, has been LeVar Burton, who most people know from Reading Rainbow, but I know from Roots and from Star Trek: The Next Generation. What are your science fiction influences, or are they not science fiction influences?
I would have to be lying if I didn't say, Star Trek. was a big influence on me. And Robin, when we were kids, and Star Trek was on, I know I'm giving away my age, but I was 12, 13, and 14 when Star Trek was on. And, Robin and I used to sit around and talk. Can you imagine how cool that would be to live on a starship and do this and do that? And all that stuck in my mind. And when it came time to write the book, I said, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. That's where I want to be. And that's the way I did it. And of course, I also read science fiction as a kid. I mean, A Wrinkle in Time is my all-time favorite book. Mm-hmm. And I have always loved listening to it, reading it, and now I write it. Yeah. So it worked out for me.
Now, I would never ask an author there, unless they're like 8 or 9 years old, and then I celebrate their age. And I'm not going to ask you your age, but you've brought it up.
I'm 68.
I wasn't looking for the number. But what I was curious about was, these are your debut middle grade novels. This is, you're not 20 years old writing your first middle grade novel. You're my age. And what was it that inspired you at this point in your life to take on this challenge? It's a lot easier to sit back and watch reruns of Star Trek than it is to write The Captain's Daughter.
Well, about 20 years ago, I had actually written The Captain's Daughters. Mm-hmm. It was under a different name. I had a different name. And I put it away and didn't really think about it. I had actually even back then started the second book, Beyond the Stars, and had a different title also. But and then I was working. I was raising my family. Didn't really think about it. And then a few years ago, I retired. And I was cleaning out the files on my computer. And I found them, and I just started to read the first book. And I went, oh, no, let me change that. Oh, no, let me change that. And before I know it, I was rewriting the entire book, gave it a whole new name, The Captain's Daughters, and published it. And it's been kind of my retirement job. Keeps me busy and out of trouble.
Well, all kidding aside, I think it's fantastic because I don't want to retire. I've had a lot of friends, when I was going around traveling around and my friends were starting to retire, they're like, when are you going to get off the road? When are you going to retire? And it's like, I'm really having a great time. I'm not thinking about that. And, now with the podcast, it's a lot of fun. And I think when you're active and you're doing things and your mind is being challenged, I think it's a much healthier way to experience retirement.
Oh, I absolutely agree. I don't sit around all day doing nothing or just watching TV. I'm usually sitting at my computer trying to think of plots and characters, and I just write. Mm-hmm. A lot of it isn't usable. A lot of it is. It kind of writes itself after a while. Once I get a plot going, I just kind of keep going with it.
Awesome. Well, the first two books are out there in the world. Are you thinking about continuing on this series, or do you have another series in mind?
Nope, I want to continue on this series. I started the third book. It's only the first couple of chapters. Girls are a little bit older. In the first book, they're 12. In the second book, they're 13. And they're facing some different problems. They're growing up. In the second book, their father rekindles a relationship that he had with someone many years ago. The girls are absolutely not used to this. They've never seen him with anybody. So it's, the problems that they're encountering, the jealousy that they're encountering, and they don't know what to do with their feelings. And they have such a close bond with their father in these books that they can talk to him about anything. Mm-hmm. So, it's how they work out these problems. And so they get through that. And plus there's the underlying plot where they're trying to help a friend and they don't listen to him, and they go down to a planet that they're not supposed to be in, and they get kidnapped, and they get caught again, and they get sick, and, and how they get through that. And in the third book, it's a few months later. I don't want to age them too quickly. Mm-hmm. They're back on the ranch for shore leave, and we'll see what goes on there. They're not getting kidnapped again. So that's kind of still rattling around in my head.
Yeah.
We'll see where that one goes.
The thing that's interesting is, and I think it would be a great, because we love talking about what kind of conversations families can have as they're experiencing a book. And certainly reading The Captain's Daughter together or co-reading the books together, it would be great to kind of talk to our kids about what they think the future is going to be like and what they envision the world will be like in 300 years or almost 300 years. But I think another great conversation to have would be to point out to our kids that, yes, there's all this great technology, and you and I grew up with 3 TV stations, and you probably had to hold on to the rabbit ears of your television and put up your other hand so your father could watch the
right with the tin foil on the rabbit ears.
Yeah, and I think I was in high school before I saw color TV or something ridiculous like that. And technology is so much different than it was when you and I were growing up. And it's going to be so much different 300 years from now. But what's not going to be different are people and the emotions and the way we deal with our emotions and our interpersonal relationships. And we know they're probably not going to be that much different because our relationships aren't much different than they were when Shakespeare was writing and when the Odyssey was written. And that, I think, would be a great conversation to have with kids.
Absolutely. I mean, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And the Captain's Daughters, the first line in the book is, "Dad, we know what to do. We're 12. We don't need your help." And it's universal. Of course, by the end of the first chapter, they're going, "Oh, where is Daddy? We need him." But, so they learn along the way that, yeah, they still do need Daddy's help.
Yeah.
And, they get into all kinds of scrapes. And this is a man in these books. He's a starship captain. He believes in rules. He believes in regulations. And he certainly believes in consequences. And so when the girls get themselves into trouble, there are always consequences. Mm-hmm. And that is also one of the great discussions I've had with kids in classrooms. Mm-hmm. Is, we'll read one of these flashbacks where the girls got themselves into trouble and they got consequence. And the conversation will be, well, do you think that was fair? Do you think that was fair what Captain Marsh did? Should he have punished them that way? And usually they say, yeah, it was fair. They did this, they did that. And, well, what else could have happened or what else could they have done? And I'm always surprised that the kids want to talk about the consequences. That they realize there are consequences for all your actions, good and bad. But if you do something wrong, there are consequences. And these girls always have to face their consequences.
Yeah. What a great, that is another great conversation to have with your kids. One thing before we ask you to tell us where we can go to find out more about these books, so you've created this world, you've created these technologies. What's the neatest piece of technology that you created in this series?
Oh, that I created. I don't know. I would I took so much from, a starship, and I have a simulation deck, which I guess is similar to like a holodeck on one of the other ships, but they have the simulation decks and, just the onboard. The girls have in their quarters their personal computer. Her name is Lucy, and it was programmed for them, and she's a little bit sassy, and it's, you can talk to her and she talks back. And Lucy, I think, is probably my favorite technology, the way she interacts with the girls. I mean, can be very sarcastic with them, and they're sarcastic with her.
Awesome. Hey, where can we go to find out more about The Captain's Daughter and find out more about you?
Well, you can go to my website, which is dianeandrobin.com. And I have a Facebook page, Doreen D. Berger, and my Twitter account is @Diane and Robin. And please go. I would love to hear comments, and I'd love for you to read it and let me know what you think.
We've had a great time, a really fun time speaking to the author of The Captain's Daughter, a super upper grade, middle grade science fiction novel from our guest, Doreen Berger. Hey, Doreen, thanks so much for listening to the podcast, and thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Jed. I really had a great time. I really am thrilled that you asked me. Thank you.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We have a really, really fun conversation with Kareen Gettin. She is the author of If You Read This, a great middle grade novel. I had so much fun speaking with Kareen, and you're gonna love the interview. I just know it. You're gonna love Kareen. You're gonna love the interview, and that's the next episode. You know, one of the things I love about being the host of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is that I've met so many amazing people through the show. Not only amazing authors, but I've met lots and lots of folks on social media. We love being connected with you on social media. Facebook.com/Reading with Your Kids, at Reading with Your Kids on Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest. Our Reading with Your Kids YouTube page, we could use a few hundred or 1,000 more subscribers. So if you are on YouTube, please visit Reading with Your Kids and subscribe to the channel, please. And also, we'd love to connect with you on Twitter. It's at JedleyMagic on Twitter. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we'll start by thanking our guest, Doreen Berger. Please be sure to check out The Captain's Daughters. Also want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Nicole Bell Castro, Maribella Q. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.